Namaste and welcome to India in Classrooms. This is the second video in a series of three in which I try to explain the contributions of ancient India to our modern civilization. In the first video, we talked about some of ancient India's contributions to science, mathematics, etc. In this video, we shall go a little deeper in trying to understand what this ancient culture was all about and how the same ancient culture, the Vedic culture, continues to our present day. Now, let's get to the most important part of this video, and that is, what was this knowledge that people came to acquire in India? Long before Einstein talked about energy and matter being interchangeable, the ancient sages in India had already understood the laws of energy. They understood and recognized that energy makes everything that is. Energy itself is the power that becomes this entire universe and everything that's in it. It generates as life, it operates as life, and it degenerates life. What does that mean? It means that energy is always, always there. It can never be created and it can never die. Energy constantly, forever, and eternally exists in different forms. Everything that exists is born, it lives, and it dies. But what was it that these sages in ancient India knew that was different from what others understood? Was that energy does not die. It continues to live in a different form. So, energy transforms itself constantly to perform different functions. When it performs the function of giving birth, when something is growing, when something is expanding, the ancient Indians called that form of energy Brahma. Brahma means vast. And then when that being, whether it is an animal, a human, a bird, an insect, whatever it is born, it has to live. It has to breathe, eat, drink, sleep. It has to operate. So energy transforms itself from the creative energy that gives life, that is born, that is from Brahma. It transforms itself to become the operating form of energy to sustain life. And that form of energy is called Vishnu. The ancient Indians still refer to that form of energy that sustains life as Vishnu. And then life has to degenerate. And when it starts to degenerate, what causes that to happen is energy when it transforms itself to perform that function of degeneration, and therefore that form of energy is called Shiva. So these three forms of energy, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, are the same energy. Remember, it's not three different energies. It is the same energy that keeps transforming itself to perform different functions. Now, when something degenerates, it cannot die because the energy that makes up that life is still there. It's still alive. What happens to it? It again regenerates and becomes a new form of life. Again, it transforms as Brahma to generate life, operate life, degenerate, generate, operate, degenerate, and G-O-D, G-O-D, this cycle of life that energy plays, and in its many different forms, is what we call God. It's that power that we refer to as God. So, what these sages taught and shared was that energy expands and contracts, expands and contracts. And this has been happening forever and it will continue forever. That's the word. It is eternal. This is the law of energy, of nature, that energy expands and contracts. When it expands, there is life. When it contracts, that life has gone to sleep and again it expands. So that's all that keeps happening all the time. That life is continuous. It is this understanding that they had forever in India, which is why this culture has a name. Today it's called Hindu, but the actual name for this culture is Sanatana, meaning eternal, Dharma, meaning law. Sanatana Dharma means the eternal law. So a person who lives according to this law of energy is a Sanatani. Now, where did they get the name Hindu for these people? Let's find out. Ancient India was at one time both the countries of Pakistan and India together. And in this land, there was a mighty river called the Saraswati River. It had a tributary called the Sindhu. And this region, this very rich, fertile region, is where the Indian civilization grew. It was the cradle of the Indian civilization. And what does that mean? That is where people settled down. They grew crops, they built cities. And once life became not nomadic, but civilized, people began to look for answers to the universe. And that culture, the Vedic culture, is what people practiced. How did we get the word Hindu for these people of this land? It was the Persians who attacked this region, and they wrote about this mighty river, the Saraswati River, which is no longer seen because it changed its course. What does that mean? We know that every time there is an earthquake or a tsunami or a volcanic eruption, um, you lose a lot of land. There are changes on our planet. And sometimes the sea rises, and those cities that we knew of at one time don't exist anymore. And that's what happened to the Saraswati River. She disappeared. But she does exist underground because that's how she changed her course. But we know about the Saraswati River through the Persian texts, in which they refer to this river as the Haravati, because in the Persian texts, the letter sa, the sound sa, is replaced by the phonetic ha. So the Sindhu became the Hindu, and the people of this land were referred to as Hindus. But what were these people practicing? They were practicing the Vedic culture. So, who were the Hindus? Hindus were people who lived according to the laws of nature, according to the laws of energy, the Sanatanis. The Hindu culture, I don't call it the religion because it was a lifestyle. It was a way of living according to the laws of life. It wasn't laws that were created by man. There is no one person who founded the Hindu religion. No. This culture, as I mentioned earlier, was based on knowledge, on understanding the laws of the universe. And you know that the laws were not written by a person, but they were revelations. There were people, the sages, who had shared the knowledge about the universe, and this became the basis of the Hindu culture. So, a Hindu is one who understands that we are all forms of energy. Every living being is a form of energy, and therefore we are all connected to trees, to plants, to animals, birds, reptiles. We're all part of that same energy. We are one and the same.
If you go to India, you might find places where there's a cow sitting bang in the middle of the road, and there are people driving calmly around it, walking around it, without disturbing the sacred animal, because cows have always been considered as sacred in India. Why is this? The cow is one animal who is extremely giving. She provides dairy. Her cow dung can be used as fuel, and the urine too is used to make medicines. So to kill cows would be killing the economy, destroying the environment. And of course, Hindus did not approve of killing cows. Incidentally, the word cow in English comes to us from the Sanskrit word go, and the word mother comes to us from the Sanskrit word mata. The Gau Mata means the mother cow. That's because she is the one who gives milk.
So Hindus would never try to convert anyone.
Because if you and me and the whole world is the same being, is a reflection of one another, then what do you convert to? So a Hindu embraces diversity of thought and believes that all paths lead to the same truth. All gods are different names for the same God.
Now let's talk about symbolism in India. Because when you think about India, you think about all those interesting, strange forms of elephant god, or the form of the swastika, or the forms of many armed goddesses. What is that? What does it mean? Let's take the Statue of Liberty. You know it's not a real person. In that case, tell me, can we abuse the statue? Can we be disrespectful to the statue? Why not? After all, it's just a metal form. Why are we careful not to disregard the Statue of Liberty? Why do we give it so much respect? It's because the Statue of Liberty represents an idea, represents something that is very important for us, and that is freedom, liberty. That is something that is so sacred, and it reminds us of that. So if you abuse or disregard the Statue of Liberty, what you're doing is you're really disregarding freedom and liberty. You're abusing it. Just as the Statue of Liberty represents something that is so sacred and invokes in you a feeling of pride, freedom, and liberty, ancient sages in India created forms to represent different forms of energy. So these images invoked feelings of love, knowledge, courage, pride, all kinds of energy. It's different forms of the same energy. As I said, it wasn't many gods or many powers. It's the same power, but that changes its form for different reasons, different functions. We have in the Statue of Liberty many symbolic things that are there to represent knowledge, direction, guidance, wisdom, um, freedom, the chains, broken chains, the seven continents on the crown, that is all the directions. So there are so many different symbols that are there within that one form. And that's exactly how you can read many of the goddesses that you see in India. Each form has a lot of symbolism within it. And so when you look at these forms, you don't see them just with your two eyes, but you see them with your mind's eye. Here we have the three forms of energy: Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, who are the generative form, the operative form, and the degenerative form of energy that are worshipped by Hindus. Now, here we have a form that has intrigued Westerners for the longest time. How can you worship an elephant-headed god? They say. Now, we know that all of these forms represent something, right? And what do you think this elephant and his friend, the little mouse, represent? This picture says that the same energy appears as an elephant and a tiny mouse. It is in every form of life, from the largest to the tiniest, and the tiniest could even mean a little cell. And therefore, all life is sacred, all life must be treated with respect and regard. Now, this was something that the ancient Indian sages talked about centuries ago, and today we say the same thing. Protect the endangered species, wildlife. Isn't this amazing? So this picture of Ganesha, Gana Asha, is Gana means all living forms. Asha is that energy, that power that is in every living form. So Ganesha represents all life and the source of all life to Hindus. It's a reminder that God exists in all beings, so treat all life with respect, don't kill. And there's one more aspect to this. Ganesha also represents wisdom through all of the symbols that you see in this form. The large ears means what? Yes, to listen carefully. The tiny mouth is to speak less. The small, narrow eyes is to concentrate and focus. The big head is not to be petty and small-minded, but to have a large mind. Think big. And then you have the most interesting part is the trunk. The trunk of the elephant is extremely flexible. It can pick up a tiny little peanut as well as a huge log. So it could also mean that be willing to take any task, big or small, be flexible, be open-minded, be willing to learn something new. The stomach, the big stomach, is to take in all of your experiences, good and bad, and digest them so that you can learn from them. I'd like to show you some representations of my mother. We all have a mother. Now, when she nourishes us and keeps us healthy, this is how I would present her. And when she's my cheerleader, I would show her as this bouncing ball. These are two representations of my mother. If I wanted to show my mother as my teacher, I'd show her as this bookworm. Or if I want to show my mother as my protector, this is how I would show her. Now, are these four different mothers, or are they four different representations of the same mother? If you're saying that they are four different representations of the same mother, you're absolutely right. In that case, can I have about 1 million representations of my mother? Maybe 30 million representations of my mother. And that's exactly what happened in India. When people realized that God is formless and that we could represent God or the forms of energy in infinite ways, then we ended up having all kinds of forms that represent God. That's the freedom, that's the liberty that there was in this country, in this land, where God does not need to have any form. God can be seen in any form that you wish to see it.
And the interesting thing is that if I wanted to show my mother in millions of ways, I could also show all the million things that my mother represents in one picture. You see pictures of goddesses with many arms in India. What are they? They are representations of the fact that energy performs infinite actions, and all of those forms can be in one. So this is the beauty of expression that we have in India. The ancient Indians, the Vedic people, knew the power of the elements: fire, water, earth, wind, rain, the seas, thunder, lightning. All of these were highly regarded and worshipped because they knew that their lives depended upon nature's elements. So they spoke about these in the Vedic texts, and later people could express themselves by imagining what Agni could look like. And by the way, we get the word ignite in English from the Sanskrit word Agni. So here are some of their representations of the elements. Here are two forms that represent abundance and plenty. You see Lakshmi, the goddess of abundance, of wealth, has coins falling out of her hands. Does this mean that she only represents money and wealth in terms of things? Or do you think that she represents the wealth of sunshine, the wealth of good weather, rain, of good friends, of good health, of knowledge? And that is what Lakshmi represents: wealth and abundance of all that is available to us in this universe. In this case, you have two different representations. The one standing on the lotus is a North Indian representation, and the one sitting on the lotus is a South Indian representation. Another form of energy is courage, strength, and this form is represented in Durga, the goddess of strength and courage. She is shown riding a tiger because the tiger is the courage inside you.
is the power within you. Durga means the remover of darkness. And that is why when Hindus worship this form, they really are invoking the power, the courage to fight their fears within them. As I mentioned earlier, the ancient Indians had the freedom to represent God, who has no form, in infinite forms. So here is another imaginative form of Durga, the courage within us. And in this case, she is called Mahishasura Mardini. Mahishasura Mardini is the killer of the buffalo demon. What does that mean? Who is this buffalo demon? Well, the buffalo represents laziness and inertia inside us. So Mahishasura Mardini is the goddess, the courage and the strength within us to completely destroy our laziness, our inertia. And for her to do that, she needs every weapon possible, because you know that we want to use every possible way to pull ourselves out of laziness. It's not easy. So we really need to annihilate, to completely destroy that, so that we can be inspired to get up and start doing something, doing what we need to be doing. Now that we've seen other forms that represent knowledge and courage and wisdom, I'd like you to look at this form not with your two eyes, but with your mind's eye. What do you think this particular form could represent? And what power within you does this represent? There is one power within us that can make us happy, and that is the power of humility. Because when you're humble and you help others, you serve others, you lose all your pride, all your selfishness, your ego, and you just become a happy soul. So Hanuman was a person, a tribal hero, who is talked about in the ancient Indian texts, who was willing to lift mountains. And as you know, a person who's willing to think of others is extremely courageous. It is only the weak who think about themselves. So Hanuman is shown carrying a mace that shows him as a strong person. And therefore, when Hindus worship this god, Hanuman, what they really are invoking within themselves is humility. So we have the swastika. What does that represent? When my son was in the sixth grade, one of his teachers came up to me and said, "Your son has been drawing the swastika. You better be careful." And I told her, the swastika is a very, very auspicious, meaning a symbol of good luck in our culture. Why? Because the swastika in Sanskrit means su astika. Su is good, astika is. All is good and well. That's what the swastika represents. In many, many cultures, many ancient cultures use the symbol to represent good luck and auspiciousness, that is, a good feeling all around, everywhere, in all directions. So you will find this symbol all over the place. When you go to India, you'll see it maybe on the wall or on the floor. Sometimes they'll do create the swastika using colored powders or flowers. And so it's amazing how a symbol can be completely misunderstood because it is misrepresented by someone who does not wish to present it in its right manner. When Hitler wanted to rule the world, he completely destroyed the meaning of the swastika, used, or let's say abused, that symbol, turned it around, made it black. It's never black in India. You will never find a black swastika. It will be red. And he used it as a symbol of hatred, as a symbol of superiority, as a symbol of a race. And it is none of that. The biggest misunderstanding that Hitler had was the word Aryan. Arya in Sanskrit means a civilized man, a civilized person. In ancient India, they would greet each other as Arya with respect, whereas Hitler believed that the word Arya represents a superior race of a light skin, blue eyes, and blonde hair. So it was this huge misunderstanding that caused so much hatred in this world. It's about time we understand what the swastika really stands for.